Hello, we're going to talk about borderline today. Do you know what a borderline is? Well, you should. You should be prepared. And you probably do know what it is because it's very popular in culture today. A little less so than, autism and ADHD and narcissism. But I think this one's going to be a little bit more impactful. Got the Bunny Therapy t-shirt going on right here. And you can have that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about borderline. Now, what's really interesting about borderline is not necessarily like a disease or anything like that. It's a structure of personality. Now, in this book, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, as defined by the American Psychiatric Association, it is a personality disorder, and that means that there's a pattern, a pervasive pattern of instability in interpersonal relationships, self-image and feelings, and how the feelings are, and they're impulsive, and they're starts out in early adulthood and goes across various things. But from a psychoanalytic point of view, it's not necessarily like a personality type. It's the way people are kind of formed, the way they're structured. And so, you could be a schizophrenic and a narcissist, or you could just be an everyday Joe and not a narcissist, a borderline. Borderline and antisocial and narcissism are kind of classified in the same area in the diagnostic, the way everything's categorized. So, sorry about that. But, so in a psychoanalytic framework, it is kind of like not so much that it's a funky plant. It's like the plant grew in a funky way. Like the structure of the plant is funky. It's not like it was like a pristine plant and then kind of got wacky. This is like saying it was kind of created this way. Now, when I was taking my license exam, and for I have a number of licenses in different states and stuff, but the first test, and I was terrified, by the way, I passed, of course, but one of the questions was, this personality disorder is the one that can change the most, and it turned out to be borderline. And borderline is very extreme. Like when you come across a borderline, hold on to your hat, you're in for a ride. And if you're dating or marrying one, wow. And this video again is going to be more practical than anything, because what do you do if you find out that your partner is borderline? Because it is chaotic. Like one of the let's just go over some of the features. Okay, like one of them is that the essential feature is a pervasive pattern of instability in interpersonal relationships. Well, yeah, and marked impulsivity. And this one will get you. Like one thing that is like really pronounced about a borderline person is that if they believe that you're abandoning them, whether it's real or not, or if you actually are, they will freak out and do all sorts of things to avoid that abandonment. And I've heard tales of like someone saying, like I had a client that was dating someone who turned out to be borderline, and this person wanted them to like get rid of their favorite pet, and they refused, and they realized, okay, this person, I'm a package deal, me and the pet come together, so if you're forcing me to choose, bye-bye, I'm sticking with my pet. and the partner freaked out, wanted to walk in front of trains, wanted to jump out of windows. The person was smart enough to hide all the knives and sharp objects. Not that a borderline is actually going to kill you or kill themselves. Now, they wind up in hospitals, they do suicidal gestures, they cut themselves, they do some pretty amazing stuff. But the point isn't really so much to kill themselves as it is to sort of punish you or get you to keep from abandoning them. But it's frantic. They will freak out if they think that they are being abandoned. And there's a reason for that. Another thing is that they're in intense and unstable relationships. And as you might guess, like someone who's willing to like jump out your window trying to get rid of your pet, or cut themselves or wind up in a hospital. It's intense and it's unstable. I did research on psychotherapy in New York, and one of the kind of inside jokes was that borderlines have more fun. A lot of times you can tell a borderline from the sex. Like, it's intense. It's really it just like everything else, and they do some amazingly surprising things in interpersonal contexts that can make them incredibly fun to be around and incredibly terrifying to be around. They also have like a really unstable sense of self. And this is one of the things that's interesting about them, is that their minds are constantly shifting states, meaning who they are, who you are, who everyone is. It's always shifting. Now, with some people, it can take months. With some people, it happens within minutes, just cycling all over again, like whether or not they like you, whether they like themselves, who are they. And, sometimes they can like doubt that they even exist. But the interesting thing is that they do know they exist. And, the psychoanalytic word for borderline, much like narcissism, it comes from the psychoanalytic tradition. And eventually, because people were trying to figure out what the heck's going on with these patients. And eventually it made its way to, psychiatry science. So it grew from philosophy into philosophically informed science like psychology, and then unfortunately it's codified in this book, which they update every few years, so don't get too attached to it. The idea is that they weren't neurotic, meaning like just nervous or whatever, people, and they weren't psychotic. They weren't on the street like howling at the moon and being paranoid, and they didn't believe the TV was talking to them, or that they were pregnant with kittens, or the aliens were coming to their homes. And I've met all of that, by the way. I've met people, I've met Paul McCartney. It wasn't really Paul McCartney, but he swore he was Paul McCartney. And I should tell you more about that guy. That guy was really interesting. He was an amazing artist when he was Paul McCartney. When he became himself, his art went terrible. At any rate, so there's this idea that there's this kind of nervousness versus this craziness, and the borderline kind of falls in the spectrum amongst all of them. And some of them are crazy, and some of them you wouldn't really know unless you trigger them on the wrong day at the wrong time for whatever reason. And it's really painful and frightening to be involved with these people. And so I do want to speak to, what happens once you find yourself, dating a person like this. How do you navigate that? How do you bring stability to it? The decision tree of whether or not you stick with them, and if you're going to part with them, how do you do that without them freaking out and getting violent or hurting themselves or hurting other people or causing scenes and being dramatic and calling the police or winding up in the hospital. I mean, it's an intense ride when you're involved with these people. And most of the people I've seen don't get out of the relationship because it is so terrifying to abandon them. They're really impulsive. And then they do stuff like binge eat, gamble, spend money irresponsibly, use substances, and maybe they'll do like crazy sex stuff that's kind of dangerous, and they drive recklessly, and they have suicidal behavior and gestures and threats and self-mutilating behavior and cutting themselves and stuff like that. And they can have highly reactive moods. You can be with somebody and all of a sudden they're super angry, or they're super anxious, or they're super sad, and they express, if it's anger, they can express it really inappropriately, and have difficulty controlling it, and have like bitterness and outbursts. And I've heard tales of people who like trigger the like it's like a light switch. It's like a light switch with them. They can be like perfectly fine 1 minute, and then all of a sudden it flips, and then they won't talk to you for days, might be minutes. I had this just delightful young lady. She was on, she was super high functioning, just like a real go-getter, super smart, beautiful young lady. And she wanted to be in the under 30, which is like a prestigious list of like super young professional people. And she would just like something would trigger her, and she would rage at her partner. And in the morning, she'd wake up, and for her, the switch got turned off, so she was fine. And she's like, hey, in the morning, like, how you doing? And the partner is kind of like, what was that? Is it safe? I don't know what to do. And but the borderline can recognize that, like, ooh, that was they must be freaked out. Whereas like a psychopath wouldn't care. They'd be like so focused in on getting whatever they'd say or charm you or scare you to get whatever they want. And the narcissist, they just wouldn't care. Everything was your fault anyway. So, but the borderline will notice. But if you're on the borderline's bad list, the naughty list, then you are the scum of the earth. And until that switch flips again, oh, you're a wonderful person. So that brings me to one of the more interesting features of the borderline is the split. And what we mean is a split in the personality. And so it goes from hot to cold. And like that switch I'm talking about, it goes between extreme idealization and extreme devaluation. So like, when you first start dating someone, like I said, like you can tell from the sex, from the intensity, you're just enamored with this person. This person's like amazing, and they love you. They love everything about you. You walk on water. It's great when you're a therapist and you first like meet somebody and you're like, wow, I'm the best therapist in the world. And then you have to stop yourself. Wait a minute. Are they idealizing me? Are they making me out to be some amazing therapist? Because they're putting me on a pedestal right now. And the problem with being on a high pedestal is when that flip switches, you're coming down, you're going to be terrible, you're going to be evil, you're going to deserve to be punished if not destroyed, and you're an idiot and all stuff like that. So you'll see like black and white. There is no gray in the borderline. So there's this rapid alternation between idealization and evaluation, and that happens not only with the therapist but their kids. And some people say that like borderlines come from borderline mothers, and that's where the split comes from. Is that when they're psychoanalytically speaking, is that when you're a little kid, you have to attach to survive. It's like the attaching instinct is born into us, and it is imperative that we attach to these giant humans, usually women, and they take care of us, and we will do, and if they smack us, we'll find a way to attach to them. And the thing is that if you have like a borderline mother, then you are the best child in the world, and then when you are bad, you're evil and deserve to be punished and ignored and condemned and all that stuff. And the little kid is confused that the same wonderful person that they've attached to could be the same monster that is making their lives like almost intolerable. And so what they do is they want to preserve the good mother and keep the bad one separate. So they split, and their personality is formed that way, to see people as black and white, like this is the good person, this is the idealized mother, and so we don't want to acknowledge the bad one, so we split them in half. We focus in on that, and then when they grow up, then they're with you, and they're like, "Oh, you're the best ever." And then one day you do something, or something goes wrong, and then they it's like there's a flip, and now you are the bad one, and you deserve to be condemned and punished. And you don't want to be the bad person, because if you do, I've heard stories of people, of them going into your closet and shredding your clothes, or picking up your food and throwing it, and like not talking for days, like I mentioned. And it's a rough ride. And not to mention the suicidal threats, the suicidal behaviors. And if there's a child involved, it's even more heartbreaking, because the kid has to watch all of this craziness, and they're so impulsive they can't really rein it in. Now they can rein it in, and there's like a whole part of the treatment of the borderline that I will not go into here. I will save it for the Patreon, for people who are in training or want to be armchair psychologists, or just want to learn more about this. And at the $50 level, you can ask me a question directly, like, "Oh, I think in your video, I think that's that person. What's going on, and how do I handle this?" But when you're on the good side, it's the greatest feeling in the world. But the switch will flip, and things will go sour really fast. And then there's the question of, like, do you have kids with this person? Do you? And most people, like I said, who get involved, they can't bring themselves to exit, because it's so terrifying and intense and unpleasant to see their partner switch into this dark version of themselves. And like I said, with the borderline, they're really confused, because they're not choosing to have these rapid shifts in state and thinking and mind, stuff like that. It just happens. And again, it could be like moment to moment, or it could be months. And so, but the good news is they do have a grip on reality, and they know that you're real, and that they're real. But if you're working with someone like this, they often get fired, because when it comes to a transactional relationship, like a job, you screw up and you freak out and you do something really inappropriate, well, you can get fired for that. And a lot of the times, mental disorder claims will not be entertained for a personality disorder. Schizophrenia? Yeah. Bipolar? Yeah. Depression? Yeah. Borderline? Depends on where you live. And so that's a tricky one. So what do you do? How do you navigate this world with the borderline? And there's something that I came up with called fact limit, because boundaries are everything with the borderline, and I'm not going to say much more than that, but there is the fact limit. You're like, if you're out and they're causing a scene, you're making people uncomfortable, it's inappropriate, it's got to stop now, that kind of thing. And you don't want to lock horns with them, but at the same time, you don't want them to endanger themselves and others, or ruin a situation. So there's got to be some boundaries. Safety first. Nobody needs to go to the hospital. Nobody needs their faces scratched. Taking on somebody with this personality structure, I do not recommend it, because you're in over your head unless you have support and help. And if you choose to go down this route, get that support and get that help and get that advice. Email somebody like me. But safety first, and like if you're in a situation where it's the loyal dog, or the person that's gonna be a wrecking ball in your life, I highly suggest you search what your values are, what you really want. Is this the relationship you truly want? And the good news is that borderlines can change, and they do mellow out over time. So I'm not going to give a blanket statement and say, run, Forrest, run. But I will say I don't recommend taking this on if you have a choice. Again, it really comes down to your values, what's important to you, whether or not you feel like you can hang in there. But the change has to be willing. It's possible, but it's often incremental and difficult. And I wouldn't recommend taking it on if you're aware of it straight out of the box. You can't fix them, and you're biting off more than you can chew. So having said that, please go to the websites. And now, if you look at this piece of paper, everything in black is more of a heading. It's the blue we're interested in. We're interested in heraldsquarepsychology.com. We're interested in therapist, 4me.jp. Because if you're in a situation like this, you're going to need support, you're going to need insight, and if you can, get them to go, because there's a way to interact with them in therapy that can be quite effective. And like I say, it can change. It just takes a lot of effort, a willingness on their part, and it's going to take some time and hard work and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, metaphorically speaking, hopefully. And there's the Patreon. Join the Patreon for $1, $20 to get the extra content and some of the behind the scenes extra videos, secret sauce. And with the $20 you get the t-shirts. And this one happens to be a pink one, halfy, generally appealing to women. But they come in small, medium, and large. You get the stickers, you get the t-shirts, you get the extra content. And then for $50, you can say like, oh my goodness, I watched your video. I'm in over my head. I'd like to consult with you. And I would take that time and honor that. So having said that, we are up to about 24 minutes, which I'm told is a long time for a video. So maybe I'll make it short for everybody else. But thank you for sticking in there. Please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I am very prolific on here, and I'm putting out a lot of content. And I'm not really trying to sell you anything. I know I've got the t-shirts, but all of this is in service of getting people into services globally. Thank you very much.